Would you like to reach our film and TV review podcast audience? Do you have a product or service of interest to film and TV home consumers or followers of the entertainment industry? Have a film or show production to publicize? For affordable price plans for all budgets, get in touch and find out about our introductory advertising options. Reach our audience of film and TV viewers and visit our site contact page at filmandtvreview.com, or you can email us at business@filmandtvreview.com. Reach out today. Welcome to filmandtvreview.com. Catch the latest film, TV and streamed show reviews every week. The views and opinions expressed by the authors and those providing comments are theirs alone. They do not reflect the views, opinions or position of filmandtvreview.com or their respective parent companies or affiliates. Filmandtvreview.com makes no representations as to accuracy, completeness, correctness, suitability, or validity of any information in this program and is for entertainment purposes only. Episodes may contain adult humor and language. For full terms and conditions, see filmandtvreview.com.
Hello there, and welcome to this film and TV review regular roundup of the last month's output over streaming and TV and films. It's in October, so we're kind of heading towards the Halloween season, so there's quite a few recommendations that we'll drop in also that are in keeping with the season. But first, I think we had quite a few releases this past 4 weeks. We'll talk about Joker, Wild Robot, Transformers 1, The Apprentice, Salem's Lot, the remake, and a few recommendations Alfonso will have that he caught his eye. We'll jump straight in with probably the biggest anticipated release, at least, and that was Joker, Joker 2, as everyone in America decided to call it. The sequel to the kind of like surprise hit, I suppose, of Joker back a few years back with Joaquin Phoenix. Richard, James, you saw this and I did as well. Was it worth the wait? Quite a lot of mixed battle lines across the opinion of this. What did you do? Who liked this, or who wants to jump in, or
who liked this?
Yeah.
Okay, so not me, but I don't know if any of my two co-hosts enjoyed it.
Well, okay, let's start with. All right, with you, Richard. What did you? Let's just get your opinion first, and then we'll see.
The first thought that I had watching this movie was that there was some. I always try to see the silver lining. There was some good stuff hidden behind a lot of messy and, in my opinion, again, stupid decisions made, and that's actually the saddest thing I can say, because in a way, that's crazy actually to have spent so much money and so much effort, because I think there is some effort made behind the camera. Because first of all, I think that it was made for the wrong reasons. I mean, why it was made, it's fortunately, it's only for money. I'm sorry to say, but I don't see any other reasons. Joker, the first one, had an ending. It didn't need another movie, in my opinion. It was a perfect movie from start to finish. So why an unnecessary sequel? Warner Bros. Saw that it made $1 billion with a very ridiculous small budget, so why not do a sequel? They spent so much money on the cast and the director in regards to salaries, like crazy amount of money. If the figures are correct, we're talking about between Joaquin Phoenix, Lady Gaga, and Todd Phillips. We're talking about this almost between the three of them, what they spent on the whole movie in the first movie in 2019. And in total, the budget is 200 million for the second movie. And anyone who's seen this movie wonder where is this 200 million dollars, sorry, because there is nothing extraordinary in my opinion visually. And I will address the elephant in the room. The movie is supposed to be like the court case is just actually the trial of the Joker, of what he's done in the first movie, or 2 hours and a half. Actually, I don't mind the length of the movie. But for some reason, they decided to do some musicals scenes. So it's not like a musical per se, but there is some musical elements, very important musical elements in this movie that are completely coming out of nowhere. I'm nothing against this genre. I'm nothing against musicals. I do enjoy a lot of them actually. Actually, I changed my mind about this. But this is such a weird decision to make because it comes out of nowhere. It's out of place. You have Lady Gaga, who is one of the most famous pop stars, and she's completely underused in this movie, in my opinion. Even her character, I'm pretty sure, as I said, if you do a documentary, if you do an interview 10 years from now to Lady Gaga, she would say actually that she was probably supposed to be a bigger part of this movie. She's not really a great part of this movie. Now into details, but I will not spoil much and I will let the other guys talk. It's supposed again to be a 2 hour and a half movie about what would be the consequences for the Joker for what he's done in the first movie, and was he mentally insane? Did he actually was he conscious about what he was doing? Was he actually doing this willingly, or is he a real schizophrenic and insane? And then actually, obviously, he might avoid the death penalty. Again, this could have been interesting actually to go deep into this dilemma, let's say, in the justice system. If someone actually kills or do terrible things because he wants to, or is he actually doesn't even control his actions? Again, there was something here, but sometimes you can see that they try to develop these ideas to try to work on this, but yeah, they just then forget about it and let's do another song for some reason. And I think that you cannot blame Joaquin Phoenix for not trying to actually to give a good performance because he's a good actor, but still, it's just a copy paste from the first movie. In the end, is the few moments where he is the Joker, and not Arthur. I forgot his last name. So yeah, it's a very big disappointment overall, in my opinion. To conclude, it's a very big disappointment. I wasn't looking forward to watch this movie, but still, after you watch the first one, the bar was set very high, and then boom, you get this, and yeah,
Okay, okay. Well, that's the prosecution. I'd like to hear from the defense now, and I think James.
Well, maybe I am the Joker within this because I think Alfonso liked it initially to start with. So I sat through it. I love the first Joker, 2019 that was, so the same year as Endgame. Thought it was really good, kind of remake of King of Comedy, but it's really good. Joaquin Phoenix won the Oscar. Didn't think it needed a sequel either, and was kind of really concerned about that. And I initially sat through this. I mean, I am a bit averse to musicals, I will say. So that did strike me as odd, but it was more the prevailing dark tone of this that I didn't like. And I think just because it was dark. I found it really confronting, and I come out of it thinking I didn't enjoy that. I didn't have a good time. But then I found myself unable to stop thinking about the movie all day, to the point that I almost went to see it again in the evening. I was like, no, because you didn't enjoy that, so that's crazy. And then a couple of days later, I went to watch it again, and I really enjoyed it the second time. I thought there was a lot in it that I had kind of missed the first time. Um, Actually, the music, averse as I am to musicals, it does make sense because this version of Joker or Arthur Fleck, he thinks that he's an entertainer, and in the first one, he thinks he's a stand-up comedian to bring the lie that his mother has told him is that he's there to bring joy to the world. In this one, he thinks he's a singer, and a lot of the musical numbers. So the first big one we get is "For Once in My Life" by Stevie Wonder. But that song doesn't really happen, so it's sort of in his head. It's like what he wanted his response to be, and the film sort of flits between this. That a lot of the times they are songs in his head, not always. There's certain times when the music's diegetic and when it's not. But particularly during the court case scenes, when he's confronted with some of the harsh realities and maybe some of the trauma that he's been unable to process, those are the moments when he kind of retreats in his head into those songs, which I didn't really notice the first time. I just thought they were just doing another song, you know. And I think it works a lot. It's probably, out of all the films that I've ever watched a second time, it's probably the most swing that I've had to coming round to a different point of view on it. And I do think it actually works as quite a good, as a really, really strong follow up. I do agree actually that Lady Gaga is sort of underused, but I would say that in the Batman universe, it's unusual to have these films that focus on one character. Batman Begins does it. Everything else, there's so many Batman films where there's umpteen villains and it doesn't have a focus. This is still very much a character, a sort of character study on Arthur Fleck. And I've got to say, the film, although it never seeks to, there were people on the left and the right that didn't like the original film for various reasons. Some people said it was celebrating this. Some people were saying it's, the other side of it. And I think this film, although it doesn't ever seek to condone his actions, it does. I think I felt a lot more empathy for the character by the end of it. And we're going to go, we said at the start of this, we'll go sort of a bit full spoilers on this. So there's a moment in court where they're reading out, they're cross-examining some of the characters from the first film, so Sophie and Gary in particularly. But Sophie's sort of talking about his mother, and then the defense barrister is talking about the abuse that he suffered as a child, and that's why the moment you go into this sort of fancy world in his head where he starts smashing up the courtroom to the song "The Joker," which is probably the most violent scene in the film. It is a fiction, but we do get scenes of him being the Joker, but they're all kind of fictionalized versions in his head. But so we know the character's been abused. There's a scene later when he's testifying and he's insulting about the guards. Brendan Gleeson's in this. It's fantastic. We just need Kerry Condon from Banshees of Inisherin. Then we've had all four of the main players from Banshees of Inisherin in the Batman universe. But you see them, it's in the trailer where Brendan Gleeson can see is shocked by the testimony, but he's very sort of disparaging about the guards. When he gets back to Arkham, they beat him, and it's such a disturbing scene, but it's the most Jokerish scene in the film as well, where he's starting to tell a joke about his mum's abusive boyfriend. And as they take him off, they start stripping him, and it's sort of left ambiguous, but you're not sure whether he's sort of been raped by the guards, basically. And that then leads into another scene where you hear another inmate being killed by the guards for sort of dissenting, for singing "When the Saints Come Marching In." And Joaquin Phoenix's face during that scene, I think, is really kind of, it's a brilliant bit of acting where you just sort of see the terror in his eyes, and it's maybe the point where he realizes what he's done as well. But I think that in terms of it being a character piece, I kind of felt at that point, maybe this character has never escaped that abuse. That's kind of carried on into his adult life. And it is, again, it's not condoning his actions, I think the other scene that's really powerful is the scene with Gary, which I won't go into lots, but I think at the end of that, when Gary almost cross-examines him, so much is said in Joaquin Phoenix's um, responses, and the fact that the character doesn't really understand what's going on, the fact that he wants to represent himself because he just thinks he's on telly, this is great. He doesn't really see at that moment the impact of what he's done. And I mean, Joaquin Phoenix lost a lot of weight for this role. When you first see him coming out of Arkham and he's completely silent, which I think is another thing that probably points to the fact he's sort of being mistreated in prison. He just looks so gaunt and like one of his shoulders is sticking out. It's an incredible physical transformation. I don't know how much that is prosthetics or how much is how that's done. But yeah, I thought it was a really good film. It's one of the darkest, most nihilistic films I've ever seen, and the ending certainly I think is probably something that's rubbed a lot of people up the wrong way because it doesn't give you a hey, that's nice ending, but the song that plays throughout both versions of the film is That's Life. And I think it, and it's fine. People don't have to like this film, and it has lost a lot of money. But I think it is a well-produced film. I think a lot of thought has gone into it. But it isn't the Joker of the comics. But I don't think the original was. And I think this does continue that story to its logical conclusion.
Yeah. It is a film that seems to ultimately be designed to actually disappoint the masses in the film universe and in almost the audiences in real life, which is kind of like, well, is this construction of an idol, which bled into real life, as in because you started adopting that mask or makeup during protests or were happening during the years after 2019, and it became this symbol. But then in the film, it purposely reflects this, and but then when you put that weight on someone who's the most maybe more vulnerable, let's say, it's a lot of pressure, and then he has to perform for the audience outside, his fans, even his lawyer wants him to lean into that it's a persona that absorbs you because it is a real thing, and he seems to reject that on every single corner, and then that's what that's kind of like that film is kind of aiming for. So it is designed to really just push back against that big narrative because it is popular. It is fun when you don't have any consequences. It's like that symbol of chaos, traditionally in the comics, and what they were pushing towards in the first film, because he almost took that mantle and then it kind of cuts away. Here it's like a year after, and it's like, well, I'm not really that person. I think he always maintains that, and that's maybe I'm trying to explain why, or trying to understand why, because I think no one can argue it is a well-made film. I think the performances are great. Maybe the songs do outstay their welcome, but I mean, it looks nice. It's huge, nice production. Performances are always pretty good for both of them, I think. Everyone in there, but it is a very interesting film about talking about idols and or those icons that you make, and then but understanding that they are icons.
I do
Richard,
wonder as well, like if this will. I don't know, because it might be that people just never watch it again. I think we're in a world now where there's so much on streaming that people just watch the new thing. But we've been through this season of lots of re-releases, Gladiators back in cinemas for the first one and things. And I wonder, I don't think anybody, so this hasn't made as much as Godzilla versus Kong, The New Empire, right? but I don't think people are going to go to a 10th or 20th anniversary showing of that film. I think they might do of this. Now that's a long way off, obviously, and I'm not saying I'm completely. It's interesting being like a film fan like this because I am kind of a little bit aware of the budgets, particularly afterwards usually, but sometimes when I go in and watch a film, I'm not. So I just kind of like, is the film good? But there are occasions when I was looking at the budget for Beetlejuice, which is under 100 million, and probably looks more. The effects are quite. It looks like an expensive movie. I think Richard would say that, even though he wasn't a great fan of it.
That's
You
true.
can see the money on the screen.
Yeah, that's
But
true.
there's a lot that Tim Burton did apparently to keep those costs down. I think everything's got more. I don't know about you guys, but in the UK, everything's like double the price that it was 5 years ago. And I think just if you're in the filmmaking business, it's becoming a similar things now. You've got to try and keep your costs down wherever possible. I mean, it probably still wouldn't have recouped that money, but I think maybe it's one of those things with Joaquin Phoenix. He didn't really want to do this film again, so they had to pay him a lot to do it
Yeah.
again.
But still, I mean, Joker Folia 2 was, as I said before, the salaries of the director and the two main characters, that's 60 million, roughly, 50, $60 million. That leaves at least 140 million. Where did they go? Where
But
did
the
they
thing
go?
is, when you look at a film, I don't know how many cast and crew on the end of it, so they've all got to be paid at like a living wage and stuff. But I mean, it is a lot of money, sure, but I don't know. Like I think I'm still of the generation where I kind of think if a film's expensive, I better see it in the effects on the screen, and we're probably out of that sort of phase now. So Terminator 2, you'd look at it and go, well, that's cutting edge CGI, so it must have cost a lot. Actually, Terminator 2, the biggest thing was Arnie's salary, I think. So still, it's often this star power to get people to do these big IPs and things. There's probably a lot of risk in it, and also they want to go off and do other things creative. I can't imagine that saying to Lady Gaga, you're not going to go and gig every night, but you're going to do a film. Is probably not as much money as you can make on the road, so you've got to make it worth her while and stuff. But we should have a deep dive budgets on film special. I think that would be a good one.
Right. Moving on. We're talking about IPs, but a kind of a fresh IP almost, or a fresh kind of like novel film, an animated one next, Wild Robot, which is getting some great reviews from everyone I talk to. It's an animated movie about, I guess, a robot and his relationship with nature. Richard, James, Andrew, you saw this. Richard,
Very nice movie. Quite surprised, to be honest.
What is it about exactly? Because it looks like a kid's film. It was like
quite quickly what it's about. Sorry. It's I can tell actually the first 5 minutes literally. So we don't know where it comes from, but a robot in the near future is ending on a beach of some island or some place, we don't know. He's ending up on the beach. He's a robot, like an android, let's say. I don't know. Is that the right word? But anyway, it's like a robot with arms and legs. And he's literally in a place, I will not tell you anything more, but he's in a place that looks like it's like the wild, hence the Wild Robot title, where actually there are no human beings, but only any kind of animal we can think about. And he's obviously entering a world where he's very different from everyone else. He's entering the animal society, let's say. And obviously he doesn't speak that language, but fortunately he's a robot, so he can actually translate animals, so he can speak to any kind of animal. And the movie is literally this robot trying to in a way be accepted by this animal kingdom, I would say, and trying to find its place in this world and in the world in general. And the way actually I'm listening to myself, the way actually I'm describing and telling you the plot is maybe one of the main reasons why this movie is actually one of the reasons why this movie is getting so many great reviews, is because it's a much more smarter and adult animated movie than you can think. When you look at the poster, you think actually that it's a great movie for kids between 5 and 10 years old, and I'm pretty sure that they will still enjoy it. But there are many messages in this movie that can be mostly understood, I guess, by young and old adults, and it's it's a very well done, beautiful movie, visually actually. I'm surprised that the animation actually sometimes make you think of not going to say that Hollywood doesn't do good movies, but it doesn't make, sometimes you forget actually it's a Hollywood animated movie, but it almost makes you think of European or even Asian animated movies. And I think, this is actually a good thing. It's a compliment. Huh? And as I said, that's actually the visual. Visually, it's very nicely done. But also, as I said, the dialogues and the whole message. And I said, I won't talk much more about this, but the whole point of the movie is, it's very, it's almost inspiring sometimes. So yeah, that's why I enjoyed it. Yeah.
Fine, okay. Andrew, you saw this a while ago, I think, before anyone else. What did you? Seems word of
Yeah.
mouth seems good on this.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Yeah. So again, I saw it a while ago. It was advanced screening. I thought it was an interesting choice to have it released when it was. At least it's a U.S. film, and it got released a week after the Transformers film got released. So you have back-to-back animated robot movies. So kind of an interesting choice, but it seems that I guess DreamWorks has kind of won out, both in terms of box office and critically. 2 for 2, I guess. And a lot of what Richard said. I mean, you have Lupita Nyong'o as she's the voice of the protagonist, the title character, and then you have other voice performers like Pedro Pascal, and I think Kit Connor was voice, yeah, and among other voices, and I mean, it wasn't necessarily the perfect film for me, only because at a certain point I thought, like, okay, this is where the movie's going to end, and it keeps going. But I guess they have a lot of stories to tell. It's based on a series of books, and I guess they want to get the idea of the family and the robot finding her family amongst the animals, and having that story continue in this kind of semi post-apocalyptic world. I don't know how else to describe it. And some serious moments, and then there's some humorous moments, like with the possum, and that the kids. There's sort of like a little comic relief, but it's not like overbearing kind of comic relief. It's it fits in the moment, and yeah, I mean it was. And I kind of suspected it would be a good film when they announced it way back months and months ago, and especially when they said they were going to show it at one of the big festivals. I believe it was Toronto. So, when you do something like that, you think like, okay, this is going to be a quality film. I mean, doesn't necessarily mean everything as we've seen with other films, but and it's turned out that it's really quality work. We'll see what happens. The best animated feature thing at the Oscars, but it should at least be a contender for that. But yeah.
And James, you saw this, but you also
I hated it. No, it's really good. I think I agree with Andrew. I'd be very surprised if it's not on the short list for best animated feature at the Oscars. Great voice cast: Lupita Nyong'o, Pedro Pascal. There's a character in it who I didn't realize Bill Nye was the voice, and I was looking, going, that looks like Bill Nye. And even Matt Berry, who's known from like UK sitcoms and stuff, he's in it, and I thought that looked like Matt Berry. So it's really good that they've captured something of the performers' faces in the design. I mean, there's something a little bit Wall-E maybe about the character. Not that that's a bad thing, like a rounded Wall-E. But I forgot that there's quite a lot of stuff about survival. There's a lot of themes about survival, which is kind of a more, maybe not the sort of necessarily the sort of completely fluffy theme that you would expect in this film. And there was a couple of jokes that really made me laugh, and I was like, I think they might be a little bit too dark for this film because it's got a U certificate, which is like a G certificate in the UK. So maybe it should have had a PG. But yeah, and I found it. I won't go into spoilers for this one, but there's a moment in it that I thought was really moving. Chris Bowers is the guy who's the composer. I think it's a really strong score, really strong score. Wouldn't be surprised if it's that's up for an Oscar as well. And it's kind of got that really cool animated style that I think after Into the Spider-Verse, there's a lot of stuff where they're not trying to make it perfect, the animation, in terms of perfectly circular. I mean, actually the character is circular, but there's a lot of sort of rough edges to some of the other characters and the environments, and it just sort of gives it a uniqueness. It doesn't feel like there's just one machine at DreamWorks that is pumping all this stuff out. It felt like it own unique look. Sorry, just muted myself there. But yeah, I thought it was a really enjoyable family film.
Okay. Wow. It could have some competition then at the Oscars for us in Best Animated Robot Adventure, because you saw Transformers 1, which from people I talked to,
Well,
saying it's not bad, which is shocking.
no, it's a good film. Now, I'm not the age group, but to be honest, this is probably a recurring theme that people like me say. Transformers is aimed at us because when we're 40 and that's what we're into when we were kids. It's like, no, when we were kids, it was aimed at us because we were kids. Um, so yeah, the untold origin story of Optimus Prime and Megatron, sworn enemies, and the voice cast, Chris Hemsworth in this, Brian Tyree Henry, Scarlett Johansson, Keegan Michael Key. Yeah, really sort of fun version of Transformers. A lot of humor in it. Feels very Toy Story sort of in its approach, but I think for the audience that it's aimed at, it's sort of perfect. Really, it doesn't outstay its welcome. I think the original '86 animated movie and the Bumblebee movie are probably the high bars. I did This might get me thrown out of the group, but I don't think the first Transformers Michael Bay film is terrible. I think the sequels are. I think they're too long and they just go on forever and ever and ever, and it's just robots fighting. The first one's all right. It's what it is. But this I felt was quite good, and I'm sure we'll get Transformers 2 and 3. So it's been a strong year for robot movies. We've had in the UK as well Robot Dreams, which I think come out maybe in other territories at the end of last year. That's probably my favorite animated film of the year. 2D film. So yeah, the animated robots, it's their year, definitely.
Definitely. Right. Next, we have suppose an origin story of sorts. Is The Apprentice. I think
Sebastian Stan, the Winter
Stan,
Soldier himself.
stars in I suppose the life or the early life of Donald Trump, or a period in his life, starting on his rise to power. Richard,
Yeah.
you
So
saw this.
I'm going to choose my words carefully.
Yeah.
Just
Is
FYI.
Yes.
Of
What period
course,
of his life does
it's
it
me.
cover then?
Of course, it's me. Yeah. So The Apprentice. So let's obviously talk about what it is about. The Apprentice is indeed. It's about the young years of Donald Trump. Let's say it's about the 70s and the 80s, and let's say how he became a very famous billionaire. The movie doesn't go further than this in regards to the chronology of events. It doesn't go. There's nothing about him getting into politics or whatever. But yeah, it's just about him, who is a kid, a son in a very wealthy family, who's trying to become a very successful businessman in New York, and try to what's the expression in English? Getting out of your father's shadow or whatever, if you know what I mean.
Sure.
So obviously the movie has been talked about a lot from all sides, obviously, especially in the US, because of the timing of its release, of the topic of the movie. Because obviously in 2 weeks from now there will be the US elections, and the movie is released in October, so obviously it's not a coincidence. I wanted to take this movie as a movie and not try. I'm not going to try, at least, talk about politics. And as a movie itself, I thought it was brilliant for what he was trying to show and to tell, which is, in my opinion, and I'm not even joking when I say that, it's a great. We joked about it earlier. Prequel to a villain story, to a villain. It's like the different stage of how to create a villain. And not, by the way, I'm not blaming Donald Trump by saying that it's just a villain that made the wrong decisions in his life. It's also how a society and how a world created a guy like this. And that's actually maybe the most interesting thing about this movie. Although, again, it must have a political agenda, director, the guy who created this, and that's his own choices. I think the most interesting thing is how he tries to show that in a way, it's us, or it's capitalism in general, and it's all the wrong things that we have done maybe in the last decades, but could only have one result, is that a guy like Donald Trump will rise from this. And what I'm trying to say is that, in a way, he's trying to use everything he can by bending all the rules, by not following any principles, so he can achieve whatever his goals are. And that's actually, that's, in a way, that's the main principle, the main ideology of our world, which is everyone for himself. And he is actually the embodiment of this, and that's what the movie is about. So Sebastian Stan is playing him, and through his relationship with his mentor, played by a guy from Succession, who's like Sebastian Stan, is going to get a nomination for me, is Jeremy Strong, who plays a real life guy called Roy Cohn. I was just checking his name, who is kind of his mentor. He kind of navigates between the most powerful people in the US and in New York especially to get what he wants. And especially Roy Cohn has these 3 rules that he keeps repeating to Donald Trump, and it becomes actually his own stuff. And you obviously, when you listen to these 3 rules that they both have, you can only think about the Donald Trump that we know today. And you think, yeah, obviously, in a way, he applies these rules, and it kind of worked for him. It has worked for the last 50 years, and especially in the last 10 years. So yeah, it's a very smart movie, in my opinion, with 2 extraordinary performances. And we were talking about Oscars earlier. I would be surprised if these 2 guys don't get nominations. That's my opinion. I know it will be a risk to actually maybe Andrew will have something to say about this. You guys can see his movie, but Hollywood is obviously not the best friend of Donald Trump, so I wouldn't be surprised if they do this on purpose, actually, to nominate Sebastian Stan. But the question is, would they have the guts not to say anything else? But at least a nomination. But yeah, I think that if you take a step back, and you're not too focus on the real political divide of nowadays, and you just watch the movie for what it is, I think you might actually enjoy it. I think so, yeah.
Okay, thanks, Richard. James, you saw this as well. What's your take on? Is it worth a watch? The Apprentice, very insightful. You found?
Yeah, it was interesting to see this period of Donald Trump's life dramatized, actually, because I don't really know anything about him. I didn't know anything about him prior to sort of the 1980s Trump Tower, when he was sort of a celebrity at that point. So, as Richard said, this follows him through the 70s and 80s. I really like in this film the way that all the stuff in the 70s looks like it's shot on very grainy film. And then when you get to the 80s, it looks like it's all on videotape. And I'm sure it's not, it's just a filter that's been applied. But I really like that. There's some sort of footage, genuine footage from the time, which is interspersed. And that's done really seamlessly. Um, I do think that Jeremy Strong I mean, Sebastian Stan is fantastic in the film, but Jeremy Strong as Roy Cohn is brilliant. Like Richard said, he has these three rules for Trump. Don't get him wet, don't expose him to bright light, and don't feed him after midnight. Um, but it's really interesting seeing that period where, yeah, he's finding his way, and it's sort of really striking to see him at the start where he's just a landlord and he's collecting people's money. I mean, it was a sort of different era, and how he's risen through that. I think, going sort of spoiler light, but there's a scene towards the end where there's a sort of confrontation between Jeremy Strong and Sebastian Stan, and Jeremy Strong is getting really frustrated because all these things that he's taught Donald Trump are being fired back at him now, and he can't get through to the real guy because he's learned all his tricks. I thought that was a real nice scene. Maria Bakalova as well, who was in the Borat sequel. She's really good in there as Ivana Trump. There's some really good use of music from the time and things. But it does feel like a film that there are obviously some sort of more scenes that have been spoken about more than others. But I don't feel the film is trying to demonize him as much as it's trying to demystify him, in a sense. And I don't think it's even that. It just feels very sort of matter of fact. These are, it's sort of taking you through this period of his early life. Like Richard said, it doesn't get anywhere near really the campaign stuff, which is sort of in the 2010s, isn't it? Quite away, sort of middle 2010s. So it must stop at like 1990. I think it starts with it.
Yeah,
Does it stop at the 1990s, talking about his biography being written and stuff like that? So it is quite early on. And obviously, this is an audio podcast, so you can't see that we're all sat here with MAGA hats on. But it'll be interesting, actually, what you said about the awards season, because I think if Trump doesn't get in, then actually would giving this any awards to this film, would that seem relevant? Because I think the film would seem slightly irrelevant if Kamala Harris gets in. But there's some good stuff in it. I do think Jeremy Strong actually is probably a good would probably be a shoe-in for a lot of supporting actor nominations, and maybe that's the way. I just think the Oscars are sort of damned a bit, because if they were even to give this a nomination for Best Picture, that is going to be perceived as like a political statement, So these things become quite like hot potatoes, don't they? So I mean, it'd be interesting. And to be honest, I don't think I thought it was really, really good. So I sort of gave it 4 stars, but I wouldn't say it's like in my top 20 even films of the year. I think it's got some really good performances in it. And I think the style of it is fine, but it's not like up there. But it's definitely worth a watch. And I think where we've talked about we don't have names like banner names for films, do we? It's all IP that drag. Actually, I noticed there's quite a lot of showings of this, like my local cinema, which is kind of a multiplex and shows mainstream films, because as soon as you say this film's called The Apprentice, it's about Donald Trump. As I was joking earlier, who's Donald Trump? Nobody says that because he's the most famous person in the world, surely. So actually, there is a big draw with this film that might get people to go to it. I don't know what the numbers have been like. Opening night, there was quite a lot of people. I think people are just interested with biopics. It's funny with biopics, so I never really kind of take everything as for granted in them. I think everybody comes out of a biopic and starts Googling stuff like, where have they got that from? What's the idea?
I did this straight away when I came home. because
Yeah, I think
I
everybody.
won't get into spoilers, but there were actually a couple of, especially one shocking scene, and I was wondering actually if where this came from. And actually, there is more to it when you look on the story itself, on the real story about it. But anyway.
Yeah, and to be honest though, when that scene come up, I was like, this must be based on something because there's no way they would just throw this in, you know. So it's obviously come from somewhere. So yeah, it's worth a watch, and I think people are just like I say, it's a very well known personality, so people are going to be interested in watching it. Yeah.
Thanks, James. Next, from changing tack completely to a horror story, is a remake of the classic Stephen King novel, Salem's Lot. Let's remember this as a TV movie, but we've got a Hollywood remake in the cinema, I think. Alfonso, you saw Salem's Lot. Is it worth the visit to a cinema for this? Is it
Well, I it's not on in cinemas. It's on HBO Max or Max in my country at least.
I think it's in cinemas in the UK, possibly.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
time for Halloween, possibly? But yes,
That's why it was so easy for me and not for you. It's a lot. It's a lot. It's it's the remake. I haven't watched the original. This one is from, I mean, stars Bill Pullman's son, Louis Pullman, and other people, that are like, for example, like those supporting actors that everyone knows, like Bill Camp, Alfred Woodard, John Benjamin Hickey, William Sadler. There's a lot of people here. Pilu Asbag, he's from Game of Thrones, for those who remember this man. And it's a nicely competently done film. It does what it needs to do. It doesn't excel. It's nice to look at. It's a very classic tale of vampires. Well, kind of. I mean, I think for its time, Silent Slot had certain novelties in the sense of how it presented the story. Some scenes are a little bit different, but it is a town where a vampire arrives and creates more vampires. That's the basic plot. And as it is based on a Stephen King book, well, it has some that kind of thing that Stephen King likes, with some scenes remind you of It, of other Stephen King's books. And you might find, if you like that kind of New England kind of setting, town, a little community where something very strange is happening, and the kids are also involved in the whole thing. The kids, the young people, all the elderly, everyone in the town, basically, from the priest to the teacher of the school, to the students of the school, to the new guy in town who's also a writer, to his love interest is a realtor's assistant. There's like, it's nice to watch. It moves quickly. I know that the original is maybe a mini series, and it's originally a book. So this is just a 1 hour and a half film or something. And it goes to the point all the time, like pa 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 pa. And so it doesn't waste any second, I guess. It has tension. I mean, I would not recommend it. It's not original. If you're looking for your original film for this Halloween, don't come here. But if you're looking for like something to spend an evening, just like a classic horror story with like your typical characters, and your Nosferatu kind of like vampire, and you're served. And also that the fact that it creates other vampires in the town, it's also gives you a lot of things also to be entertained, because this is like a virus, right? Like vampires create other vampires. Well, this is kind of like the thing that makes this mostly the most entertaining thing to me was this kind of vampire kind of disease that you can transmit easily into the villagers of the town. Well, yeah, so entertaining but functional, let's say.
Yeah, I mean, Stephen King's tomes, books are quite hefty volumes, so sometimes they work maybe better as kind of big TV movies. I think there was the first version of this was with David Soul. I think it's back in the
1979.
80s. Yeah.
And then there's the 2004 version with Rob Lowe.
But they kind of work as TV movies because they kind of it's a very kind of small creeping horror that happens in every kind of like a small town in America, and then these things, the horror seems to slowly manifest, and that's his style. So it kind of makes the unbelievable believable because it starts to creep into everyday life. If not, I was just wondering how it would work as a film where it's more of I guess just a running time of typically 2 hours or something like that. But
it does feel very condensed, and they kind of combine characters like when Alfonso mentioned the realtor's assistant, like in the miniseries, and I imagine the novel, it's like two different characters, like the realtor's assistant and the love interest. It's two different characters. The love interest is actually, I guess, a school teacher. And here they kind of combine the characters, I guess, because of the runtime. And on that note, there's like certain storylines that just don't get focus. So,
yeah. Okay. Well, okay. Next, Alfonso, you do have some other films that you did watch. First time you see Apartment 7A. I haven't heard about this.
Well, it's actually a prequel to Rosemary's Baby.
Oh.
Yeah, it's completely a prequel. It stars Julia Garner as our new Maya Farrow, let's say. Well, new, like the prequel Mia. I don't know how to say it. The person who was living in that building before Mia arrived, and Diane Wist, I think it's how it's said, Jim Sturgis. So there are people here that are good actors, and it's a nice film. It has this kind of foreboding doom or impending doom that permeates the Polanski film, and it's, how can I say it? It's one of these films that it's called, like, they are called requels. Like they are mostly following the same steps as the original, following the same kind of characters in the building, and the things happen in more or less the same order, although they are different. The same, it's like the same but different. This is a dancer who wants to be on stage, but has an injury, and she begins with her relationship with this building and its occupants with this kind of help that they provide to her to be there, because she found herself without a job and in very cruel situations in Broadway, trying to, her ambition and her injury don't get along very well. and also Hollywood producers are very cruel, and suddenly these people from this building want to help her, and then things happen in a similar fashion as Rosemary's Baby. But I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the actors. I hadn't seen Jim Sturgis for ages and ages, and it was like he was trapped in that building. But here he was, maybe because it's the first time that I hear him in original version in like English, and I thought he had very good vocal performance in this film. I mean, maybe his face is not very expressive, but his voice was very expressive here. Diane Wiest is great as the more elderly neighbor, part of an elderly couple that Julia Garner befriends. Julia Garner commands the pictures, is the protagonist, and she goes through a lot, of course, as being the baby's the baby to be's mother, the person who is pregnant, basically. So I don't know. I guess if you are a fan of Rosemary's Baby, the film, come and watch the prequel of the, because you will find many things that you like. It's one of those, like, much like Salem's Lot, but I think it's a little bit better in the acting, for example. I don't think it is a fault of the Salem's Lot actors, but just here they are very good. And well directed and well staged and nice. It's a good film.
Okay, that's good to hear. Right. Next, you do have another bit more in keeping, I guess, with the season. I'm guessing, what is this? Grotesquerie, if I pronounce that incredibly
It's
well.
not a film, it's a series.
Okay.
It's a series from the Ryan Murphy's production empire. It's a series about certain gruesome murders, Seven style, who are happening in a small town, and there's a detective played by Niecy Nash that is on the case, and she has like kind of a sidekick, a nun, that is helping her, and because these gruesome murders seem to be inspired in Catholic themes. It's one of these series by the Ryan Murphy's Empire production house, whatever. It's also has one of the Menendez brothers actors who here plays a priest. It also has something that Ryan Murphy does now in his series, that is done some kind of, I don't know, celebrity casting. Here is the Taylor Swift's current boyfriend, Travis Kelce, the football player, who is here, has a role as well. And I think all of these are great actors. I mean, Travis is beginning, but he does well enough. The series also stars Leslie Manville, who is, like, I think one of the greatest actors in the UK, and she has a very fun role. She's like having the time of her life here. It's a supporting character because the Courtney B. Vance, also a great actor, is the husband of Niecy Nash, the detective, and he is on life support. And Leslie Manville is the nurse who is taking care of him, and is taking care of him very, very closely. So it's a little bit crazy as a series, like just some Ryan Murphy's production are. It's a little bit weird, a little bit on the side of weird. It's that kind of series like Hannibal, where the grotesque bodies pile up everywhere, and it's as the series progresses, it gets weirder and weirder, and there's a twist and another twist, and the series is kind of progressing into one of the things, like one of those seasons of American Horror Story where you don't know exactly what is going to end, or when, yeah, like it has started in one point, and right now is, well, it has progressed far from it. I don't know. It's in, I don't know if you like Ryan Murphy's series or like American Horror Story mixed with a procedural. Maybe it's your thing.
All right then. Next, in keeping with the more spooky offerings this month as we approach Halloween, is the Terrifier trilogy. James, what or who is the Terrifier? And you've seen all three films, I'm guessing. So
I have, yeah. So apparently this started, Art the Clown, the antagonist of this series, started in a short film called The Ninth Circle back in 2008. He then was in also a film called All Hallows Eve from the same director, and they did a short film just called Terrifier. So the original main Terrifier film came out in 2016, and 2 years ago we got Terrifier 2, which sort of got a little bit more notice, a little bit more traction, and now Terrifier 3, although it's still pretty low budget affair, has been unleashed into to cinemas to audiences of people that have been walking out of it, I think, because it's quite extreme. I think that these are kind of the homages to the slasher genre, but they're kind of done in a way that the kills are sort of very protracted, like in the sort of style of Saw, but maybe not quite as intricate in the design. So it's kind of, they're not particularly scary, these films, I don't think, but they're just very gross. There's sort of a lot of fake body parts that are just mutilated and things. And there's this sort of thing I keep hearing people talk about with these films is the original film doesn't have a plot, and that's why it's bad, and that's why they had to do a lot of plot in the second one. But I feel the plot. So the first film starts with a clown following these women on Halloween, and it's quite an unnerving sort of odd performance. I mean, if you have a phobia of clowns, it's probably going to get you. But there's really no knowing who's going to survive that film. There's a big sort of body count. There's people who you think are going to be the protagonist, and then they're not. But unlike, say, Psycho, which did that, you then think, oh well, this new person's going to stay to the end. Oh no, they've got decapitated as well as it goes on. And I really like the sort of the low budget DIY aesthetic of the original. It's kind of it like I say, it is a homage to those things, and it's a really tight running time of about 90 minutes. You then get the second film, which is 2.5 hours, so it's like only half an hour shorter than Oppenheimer. And it feels to, although there's some really good stuff with the protagonist that they introduced in the second film, about her father and stuff, but it feels like the Zack Snyder school of film storytelling, which is anything that isn't action is story. But sometimes a lot of that doesn't really feel relevant to what's going on. I think the reason you're probably watching a Terrifier film is for the kills. You just want it to be more like 90 minutes. The third one is set at Christmas, so Art the Clown is terrifying people in a full Santa outfit. This time, the wrestler Chris Jericho turns up, and it's 2 hours, so it's still like a little bit long. But I think the main cast, so you've got Lauren Lavera, who I really hope goes on to do some other stuff other than Terrifier films, because she's really, really good, and I think she's a maybe is underrated in the reason this series is probably going to run for at least two more films. I think it's probably going to be more than that, because I think they're very cheap to produce, but they're bringing in quite big box office numbers for what they are, I suppose. And Elliot Fulham, who is kind of, you feel like he should be cast in Stranger Things, like he's kind of good in those films. But they're definitely not for the faint-hearted, I'd say. I do feel as well. I did enjoy the first one, but there's a particular kill in the second one which feels a little bit like it goes on a bit too long. Like I don't I don't know if maybe once you've seen one of these films, you've seen them all, but they'll have their fans, and obviously horror films are in a long tradition of having far too many sequels before people get fed up with them. But
I
yeah,
have a question.
Yeah.
Why are they so popular? Why have they risen in popularity so much?
They're very popular with horror fans. Just the whole Art the Clown look, and I think they also, because in slasher films, there's sort of a thing about, oh well, these are the people who are going to get it, sort of like the jerks or whatever, and certain people are safe. And I think in Terrifier films, really no one is safe. And not only do they get killed, but they get killed brutally. It doesn't matter if you're sort of like a jerk or a really nice person, you have equal chance of getting killed brutally. So, and that seems to be very popular with, horror fans. I'm not saying this specifically, but I think it was last weekend, there was a horror con in Manchester. And it wouldn't surprise me if, like amongst a lot of the people who would, attend something like that, it would be very popular. But and I think also because the second film sort of expanded the whole thing, as James said, about the new protagonist, Sienna Shaw, Lauren Lavera. I can't remember the actress. I think that's the actress' name. And so she's become like the new focus of the franchise, sort of like a counterpart to. I mean, without getting to spoilers, there's like a whole world building that's going on. So, in addition to having the whole slashers and the brutal kills, there's a whole world building that's going on. On that note, there will be a fourth Terrifier film, which isn't really surprising because the third one kind of ends on. Let's just say it's no surprise that there's a fourth one. So,
Okay.
Yeah. And I've heard a few people, even fans of the original, that aren't happy with the end of the third one, but the third one feels like it's a nod to Hellraiser or Nightmare on Elm Street, even going into a more supernatural direction. But yeah, I think that's a really good point, Andrew, because I did know, I haven't sort of read up online, but I did think that in the first one that those rules of who dies in these films, which are kind of judgy, archaic, outdated rules, aren't they? Of like, or if you swear or you drink or you have sex, you're going to get killed. It seems very, very judgy. But it's just more interesting, I think, that yeah, I did watch the first one. Like, I have no idea who's dying next. But they're definitely not going to be for everyone. I think. I think if you're into horror films, they might do something for you. And even with myself, I'm not sure. By the end of the third one, I mean, it's a lot to. There are a lot to watch in a row as well. So maybe by the time the fourth one comes out, I shall be. Well, the fourth one comes. I'll either be. I'll miss the last year of not watching Terrifier films, or I'll be locked up because I'm a psychopath for watching Terrifier films.
Right. Well, okay, thanks. Okay, as we're just heading towards Halloween, I just thought quick round. If anyone would like to give a shout out to any spooky or horror offerings that maybe caught their eye and would recommend to our listeners. Andrew, any title comes to mind?
yeah, I'm just trying to narrow it down. And something didn't come out recently, but it's stuff that came out this year. I'm just trying to go through them all. It happens every time get to Halloween and go through and watch stuff or rewatch stuff or rewatch some Halloween episodes of TV shows from when I was growing up. I know one of the more popular horror films this year, not so much in terms of gross box office, but in terms of just amongst the horror fans, was a film called Oddity. And I got a chance to watch it, and honestly, I thought it was okay, and I get why people might like it. I just personally wasn't as crazy about it because, without giving too much away, basically what Oddity is about is this woman. She has a twin sister, so this woman. It's not a spoiler because it happens early on. She gets killed and her. I won't say too much more. So I'll just say that most of the film takes place a year after this woman's murder, where her twin sister, who's played by the same actress, by the way, even though they look different, it's the same actress. Her sister, who's visually disabled, is blind, and is kind of like a psychic medium. And this dead woman's sister is sort of keeping tabs, so to speak, on this woman's deceased woman's husband and his new love interest. And the husband works as a psychologist, I guess, a therapist. And so, and I won't say too much else because, some may get a little spoilery. Again, the woman's the sister of the deceased. She works as sort of a psychic, a medium, deals with a lot of cursed objects. There's one that appears in the posters and the media for the promotional stuff for the film. But there's a lot of stuff that comes into play that doesn't necessarily come in, maybe the trailers or the promotional media. But I would say overall it has like a creepy feel to it. The location, the house where everything is set, it's sort of like stuff lurking around, the shadows. Some that's creepy. I guess for me it wasn't as impressive only because you have something that you think like, oh, this is what's going to come into play. This is what's going to come into play in the story, and it's not. Maybe if I hadn't seen all that, I might have been maybe more impressed with it. And then another film that I saw recently, I think it's on Shudder, called Daddy's Head, also dealing with issues of trauma. It's this family where this man has passed away. It happens at the beginning of the film. And so his son and his wife, who's actually the boy's stepmother, have to kind of, deal with the aftermath of this man's death. And sort of the boy and his stepmother are, kind of butting kind of at each other. And, he's very much like, not used to this new parental figure. The stepmother married his dad just before the dad passed away. So the kid's like, oh, I'm not really keen on you as my parental figure and that whole thing. And she's really trying her best. And so in the midst of all this, something supernatural happens. And there's like some kind of creature that keeps showing up at their home, and it sort of looks like the deceased dad and husband. So yeah, it deals with a lot of issues of, being part of a blended or being part of a new family and trying to get people to be appreciative of, or to get along and be like, hey, you're like a new parental figure, and kind of fulfilling that role and the issues that come with that. Like, I don't know if anyone has dealt with issues of having step parents or, someone who is part of a blended family or something that's outside of what like the usual family dynamic. So it does deal with that. And I thought that was kind of an interesting thing. It may have been done in other films, but I think they really kind of went to focus on that. And I guess one other film that I saw, sort of just a sort of like a campy kind of thing, but still, I guess, well made for what it was, I suppose, is Sting, which came out earlier this year. And that's about a spider, a giant spider. Doesn't start out giant, but becomes giant as the film progresses. It's sort of alien in origin. And it's an Australian-made film, I believe, but it's mostly Australian performers doing US accents. So it's, I think, set in New York City, but filmed in Australia, and mostly Australian, not all, but mostly Australian cast. an Australian filmmaker. And this, again, speaking of, blended and that kind of family, is this girl is the protagonist. She has her mom and her stepdad and her new baby brother, or I guess half brother, and that's her family. And she kind of misses her dad, who's I guess there's been a divorce, a separation, and she misses her dad and wants to see him. And her stepdad is trying to be like the new dad, and trying to get into that dynamic. And so into this dynamic, you have this alien-ish spider that shows up, and she decides to keep it as a pet, and it starts out like normal spider size. She keeps feeding it, and eventually it starts becoming less of a normal sized spider, and going after the different tenants of her block of flats, or estate, I guess, whatever you want to call it. So yeah, it's entertaining-ish. I mean, it's not too heavy, but I think it's decent, for that. So, and there's plenty of other horror stuff this time of year. So, maybe on Saturday, if I get a chance to come, I may mention some more. But those are some of the ones I caught up with recently.
So one of the most fun horrors I think I've seen all year is Abigail. And it stars Alicia Weir, who was Matilda. And the plot of it, I mean, this is, if you don't want to know the plot of this, put your fingers in your ears, but it is ruined. It's sort of ruined in the trailer. So there's a bunch of people led by a sort of gang led by Melissa Barrera and Dan Stevens, and they decide to kidnap a gangster's daughter to extort money out of him. However, what they haven't placed money on is the fact that the girl that they've kidnapped is a vampire. So it's the worst child you could possibly kidnap. I'm not saying you should kidnap children. I'm just saying you shouldn't kidnap a vampire one. Are we recording?
Yeah.
But it's a very fun. It really reminded me of From Dusk Till Dawn, which obviously has a similar thing that they're on the run and then they turn up somewhere and there's vampires, which is a good way to do it, because I think with Salem's Lot, there is something for me about vampires that it never particularly scares me. I don't know if it feels quite old fashioned now, but it feels like I've never seen. The only ones that work for me are the sort of fun vampire movies, but maybe I just haven't seen enough. So that was really good. I think. Speaking of Apartment 7A, there was a prequel to The Omen called The First Omen this year, which had a really good trailer where everything was backwards. And I thought, I bet the film won't be very good though. And the film it's not perfect, but it's really well shot. The cinematography is really good, and there's some really creepy moments. There's a bit in the dark that I found really intense when I was at the cinema, so that's quite good. But the other one that I thought was really good was Immaculate, which I'm not usually a fan of creepy nun films, but this is Sydney Sweeney, an American nun who embarks on a new journey when she joins a remote convent in the Italian countryside. And then she joins this place, and she's sort of frowned upon because she's a young nun. The nuns there are a little bit older than her. She's an outsider. And then things get weirder and weirder and weirder. And it's one of those films where I thought it would be quite a middling horror film, and I didn't think it would go all the way in terms of shock value. Towards the end, the final moment, I think you're just like, wow, are they really going to go there? And a lot of it is done off camera as well, so it kind of leaves it to your imagination, but still manages to be really shocking in what it's implying. Weirdly, the film has quite a lot in common with Jurassic Park, but I can't really explain why without spoiling it for you. But it's quite an odd film, and it's one of those ones at the cinema. You can tell at a cinema showing of a horror film if the audience have enjoyed it or not. And when the credits rolled for Immaculate, you could tell everyone was like, yeah, that's the kind of ending we wanted to see. So The First Omen, Abigail, and Immaculate, they would be my choices from this year for horror.
Thanks.
But I will say, I think I said it before, I think Longlegs, almost you need to think of it as a sort of supernatural crime drama rather than a horror. Richard, you would probably be okay with that. I think there is maybe one scene, but it's Nicolas Cage, so you'll be all right with it. There's an insane scene, but it's kind of I can't ruin it.
I think Lovelace was the film that spooked me the most.
Yeah, I'm
in
just
some
thinking
scenes.
the ending's quite intense, but it's more like a crime. It's sort of like a supernatural crime detective thing, isn't it? It's really good. I want to see it again, actually. But yeah, maybe leave it. Adam's Family's getting a 4K release.
There you go.
Good films.
Well, I did recently see Smile, but I know Smile 2 is recently out this week. But if you want to catch up on the original, it's actually, and maybe you don't want anything too gory, but it is a nice kind of a psychological thriller, but then it kind of veers into more supernatural territory. But Smile is a very quite good, very well put together film, actually. So I would recommend that. And Late Night with the Devil, that came out earlier this year. Definitely, it's the kind of televised exorcism on the kind of a American style 1970s type show. It's good build up of tension there, and definitely I think worth a watch. Right. Well, thank you for everyone. That was our October recommendations and a few recommendations coming up to Halloween. Thanks for my usuals. Guess Richard, Alfonso, Andrew, and James. Until next time, see you then.
We hope you enjoyed this film and TV review.com episode. Catch the latest film and TV reviews, together with regular episode content from the world of film and TV every week. See you soon. Would you like to reach our film and TV review podcast audience? Do you have a product or service of interest to film and TV home consumers or followers of the entertainment industry? Have a film or show production to publicize? For affordable price plans for all budgets, get in touch and find out about our introductory advertising options. Reach our audience of film and TV viewers and visit our site contact page at filmandtvreview.com, or you can email us at business@filmandtvreview.com. Reach out today.